Good morning, I'm Richard with EV4U Custom Conversions. And this is just another episode in our Karmann Ghia Repair, Maintenance, and Improvements series. And this particular one is going to be reinstalling the transaxle. We recently showed you removing the transaxle, and now we're going to show or go over the process for reinstalling it. We had a transaxle that had some issues, so we ordered a rebuilt one and waited the 4 weeks to get that in. And so once we received that, we pulled ours out and are putting the new one in. So let's go over that process of reinstalling. So one of the first things we did is we did a few things while the transaxle was out of the vehicle. We pulled the old one out and box it up, get it ready to send back for our core deposit. And then while the new one was still out of the vehicle, we did a couple things because it's just the way I wanted to do it. And one of the first things was we installed the throwout bearing. Give you a shot of that. All right, so here's the throwout bearing installed. They're quite simple to install. It's held on with a couple clips. And on the later ones like this, where they run on a little shaft or whatever you want to call this piece, I forget what VW calls it, but anyway, this collar I believe is what it's called. Just slightly grease that up with some multi-purpose grease and install that that bearing, throwout bearing, and that's done. We also installed the motor mounts, the transaxle mounts. There's 3 of them. This is the old transaxle that we removed. These are the old mounts, which we replaced with new. But these are the rear mounts. There's 4 nuts that hold those in place. And then there's a plate that goes between these that mounts right here with a bolt. I want to say that was a 19mm bolt. And then this is where the large nut goes. And so we installed all 3 of the mounts. This is the front mount. And so all 3 of the mounts were installed. And then in the front, we loosened the nuts on the bolts that come from the pan that hang down that this slid into. And so those are loose. So when we install this transaxle, we're going to put the front mount into place. It'll just slide into place, and that'll hold it in there. Also, while the transaxle was out of the car, we filled it with fluid. We did that because it was a brand new transaxle, didn't have any fluid in it. And we know the capacity is 3 liters, and so we put 3 liters of transaxle fluid in the transaxle while it was out of the car, while it's easier to get to. And again, the fill plug is right here on the side. It looks very similar to the drain plug, which we showed you before. And again, it uses that 17mm hex tool to remove the plug. I just snug them up. There is a torque spec on those, and I don't happen to have that for you at this time. So after that, using a transmission jack, we lifted this thing back into place. And before we moved it all the way forward, attached the reverse switch wires, which are right here. Here's the reverse switch on the back side here. So on our rebuilt one, they paint these things. Took some sandpaper and cleaned the terminals here, make sure we made good contact, and then reattach those wires, and then put this into place like I was mentioning. Here's the mount. Goes something like this. And so this then was fit into place, and now the front of the transaxle is being supported on those two nuts. We raise it up to where the carrier bolt can go in, and we install and torque those. And those are torqued to 166 foot-pounds. Let's take a look at it. Okay, so these are the transaxle carrier bolts right here. One on each side. Same with, there's a little bolt there that holds this cross piece in place, but the carrier bolt goes through a hole in this piece. So I just attach the cross piece loosely with those until I get that carrier bolt in place and torque down, then I tighten these down. Also, the motor mount bolts I let loose also. So everything's kind of loose except for that front motor mount. The mount to the transaxle is tight, but we've just slipped that front mount into the bolts that hang off of the pan. So once we tighten the carrier bolts, 166 foot-pounds, and I snugged up the other carrier bolts and the rear motor mount bolts, then we tightened up the two front bolts. Let's see if we can get a look at those. All right, here's the front motor mount. It has this cover that goes over it, and then it's bolted here to the transaxle flange that we saw on the old one sitting on the jack. And then this is where it mates to the vehicle right here. In front of the forks on the pan, right at the front here, there's two bolts that are hanging down right here. And so this is the mount, the nice shiny black parts here that just slid into these. Once these were loose and hanging down, it just slid in there real nice. And then once everything on the rear was torqued, then we torqued these two bolts. And so now the transaxle is bolted in place. And we're ready to bolt a few other things. For instance, the ground strap right here. I got to reattach it. And of course you can see here maybe the reverse switch wires attached there. And so we need to reattach. Grab my light. We're going to need to reattach our clutch, both where it mounted. Remember the cable mount on the side? We'll need to attach that to the transaxle, as well as the cable. So you're going to have to reattach the cable mount, which is hanging loose now. I don't know if I can even see it from here. That needs to be reattached, and then we need to reattach the clutch to the throw-out bearing arm here. Next, we need to reattach our constant velocity joints. If you've replaced them, we're not going into that process in this video of packing the joints and so forth, installing new boots, whatever. This one, we're just talking about reinstalling the transaxle. And so you will reattach the constant velocity joints, and the 6 bolts, those are just I put in those snug, and once they're all snug, then you're going to do as it was in removal. We're going to rotate the axle till we have 2 of them up top, and then set the parking brake and torque those, and those are torqued to 25 foot-pounds. And so I would do, you know, both sides 2 at a time, rotate them around, set the brake, torque them, release the brake, rotate it, do 2 more, so forth. All right. Well, once our transaxle's mounted and in place, we need to install the engine, or in our particular case, the motor. And once the motor's in place, we can adjust the clutch and connect our shift rod coupling. But those 2 steps we're actually going to show you in a separate video. We'll have a video on the clutch adjustment, and then we'll have a video on the shift rod reinstallation. If you haven't pulled it out like we did to replace the bushing, it's not a big deal to reconnect the shift rod coupler. And it's not a big deal to adjust the clutch, but we will show you the clutch adjustment in greater detail. So, what I like to do with our electric motors is we use our transmission jack, and we have a little cradle that fits in the jack, and that cradles the motor. And using transmission jack allows us to raise the motor, allows us to articulate it much better than you can with a floor jack. So we can adjust the angle front to rear, and we can rotate it a little bit side to side so that we can get everything lined up exactly the way we want it. So the way this adapter coupler works is that we have 4 studs that thread into this aluminum adapter, but in order to get clearance and everything, we thread those in after it's in place. So we're going to raise the motor into place, line it up with our input shaft, and get it into place. I've already installed one of them into the transaxle. It's just fitting in loose. And the reason for that is there's a cooler behind that, and we don't have, without removing the cooler, to put that stud in afterwards isn't practical. So we'd have to remove the cooler in order to do that. So that one's in place, doesn't stick out very far, and it's at the top, and so that shouldn't cause us any issue on installation. So let's do it. Okay, we have our motor cover pulled back out of the way so that we can slide this in without any interference. Bring this up close. And we're going to raise the motor up. This is a tight fit. Go up to where we're just almost touching the transaxle here. Keep it close, but we don't want to interfere with the clutch here. Gotta miss that input shaft of the transaxle. Okay, boom. We're now touching the back part here. So if I can come forward a little bit. So now what we're going to do is we're going to tilt the motor. Whoop, wrong way. Tilting the front up and the back down. Okay. Not quite clear on the splines yet. We'll raise it up a little bit more. Okay, again we're touching in the back. Forward just a little bit more. A little more tilt. Oh, we're clear. Need to drop it down a little bit though. I'm touching in the back here. Oh. Boy, like I said, tight fit. We're just barely catching here on the lip. There we go. I'm going to bring it up a little bit. Okay. Now we're going to change the angle of the motor again. So we're dropping down the front. We had to break this loose, if you remember, when we did the removal so that we could get the clearance. Need to get the right angle here. We're a little high. Let's see here. Need to match the angle of the transaxle with the angle of the motor. Okay. We're now clearing our little cover here. Okay, now my stud's what's holding me. So now I'm going to have to adjust to where that stud is lined up just right. And thread the stud in. And I'm going to do that from down below. So once the motor is secure, then we're going to put our band back on for our blower. And so now we're going to cinch that down. We've just got it into position. We'll snug it, and then we're going to connect our motor cables. Okay, so now we just need to snug these down. blower goes in place like this. Connect the contacts for the motor heat switch. Just plug in. There's a little brace that goes here. So we'll tighten these up, put our filter on, and the motor's installed. So then after that, we want to adjust our clutch, which you'll have to check out that video on adjusting the clutch if you want to know more. And then remember to hook up your shift linkage coupler and replace the inspection plate. So in our particular instance, I need to, once I connect the coupler on the shift rod, we need to reinstall the batteries on this one and connect them. So that too will be in a separate video. So stay with us.